We were camped at about 10,000 feet in the fall of 1999. My dad and I were elk hunting along the Continental Divide here in Colorado. There's very few people I'd rather be in the wilderness than my father. We enjoy being out in the wild. We've been hunting together for years, backpacking together for years. It's truly one of the most soul-gratifying things I've ever experienced, is to be in the woods with my dad. On this particular hunting season, though, we weren't having very much luck, and so we came out after a few days, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and we were both supposed to preach at our respective churches the next morning, so he went to his place and I went to mine. But when I went down to my home, I found out that my marital unfaithfulness had been found out while we were up in the woods. My wife left me, took our 3 sons and moved in with her parents, left me alone in our house. I typed out an email to the leadership of my church and resigned. And I didn't know what to do next. I'd spent my entire adult life building a reputation and a resume as a man who was trustworthy, as a man who had integrity, and I had squandered all of that through some very selfish choices. I had no hope now. I didn't know whether I was going to have a family anymore. What was I going to do for a career? How was I going to survive? In a moment of desperation, I decided I'd go back up into the mountains, so I got some more supplies and I went back up to my camp. But I thought maybe I'd be found there, and I did not want to be found. So I packed up my camp and I moved further in and higher up, and I pitched my tent in some dark timber in some snow about 3 foot deep. As I was sitting there alone in the mountains, I began to just try to take stock of how I had gotten myself into such a mess. My soul felt like acid had been poured all over the inside of my chest. I was just on fire with shame and guilt and brokenness. How was I going to care for my family? How was I going to face the world again? How was I going to stop this pain? And then I thought of an idea. I thought, well, I could have a hunting accident here in the woods, and the life insurance would take care of my family, and I would be out of pain. Well, then I thought, how selfish is that? Here you are. You've destroyed everything you've ever built, and you're still trying to manage your own pain. And I started to think about Jesus. I started to think about my wife. I started to think about my 3 sons, my family. And I took those bullets out of that gun and I threw them out into the 3 foot deep snow. And then I decided to pack a light pack and climb up higher on the ridge behind me, and I did that, and I checked my cell phone messages. And when I found those cell phone messages, there's about 10 or 12 of them, and most of them were hateful and angry. There was one from my wife who was begging me to call her to come home. She was worried about me. She hadn't seen or heard from me for a few days. But there was another phone call, message on that phone. And I pushed the button and I listened to it, and I could hear the wind blowing through the receiver. And the familiar voice on the other end was breathless. But I'll never forget the message that my father left on that phone. He said this: "Son, I know that if you don't want to be found, I'll never find you. But I just want you to know that I'm up here walking these ridges looking for you, and I love you." Well, big tears started to roll down my face and chill me to the bone, and I sat down on that high ridge and I began to think about my family, and I decided that I was going to go home. So I climbed back down the mountain, packed up my tent, went to the trailhead. And as I was pulling out of the trailhead, up the road came a truck. It was my father. I unzipped the window of my Jeep and I asked him what he was doing. He said, "I've been coming up here every day looking for you." I said, "I want to go home and see if I can rebuild my marriage." He said, "Do you want me to go with you?" I said, "I do." And we drove back down and had a conversation with my wife. I don't know who's coming to find you. And I don't know what he might look like. He might look like a memory of the face of your spouse. It might look like the voice of a friend. But I have it in my mind to believe that the person who's coming to find you is a man named Jesus, who believes in you and believes in restoration.